The US Food and Drug Administration are updating their warnings for all mRNA jabs because of what they call persistent concerning cardiac MR findings following mRNA COVID-19 jabs. Now, I'm going to have to be very careful what I say and how I say it in this video for obvious reasons, because despite the overwhelming evidence that jab injuries are real, serious, and more common than what most people believe, it is still a very dangerous thing to actually acknowledge online. Even when authorities such as the FDA, who used to insist that there was nothing to see here, are now finally, belatedly, admitting what many of us have known for a long time. When these jabs were made all but mandatory, there simply was not enough long-term data for them to claim that they were safe. And tragically, the people who trusted the experts were actually just gambling with their health and unknowingly participating in the world's largest clinical trial for the sake of Big Pharma's profits. But now there's a new sheriff in town, specifically Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And at long last, we are beginning to see the acknowledgement of the truth. Now, I'm going to read you the text of this labeling update direct from the FDA, and I'm going to play you part of this presentation by Dr. Vinay Prasad, who is the director of the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, as he discusses the findings of the FDA research into the effects of the mRNA jabs on heart health. And for the YouTube censors, remember, these aren't my opinions. This is coming directly from the experts who you've been telling us to trust this whole time. So instead of labeling this video as misinformation, perhaps this time you should shut up and listen. Now, before we get to the press conference and the press release and the videos, my name's Topher Field. This is the Topher Project, and I help busy people like you to keep up with the world as it changes around you. I am 100% viewer supported. My videos regularly get demonetized because I dare to bring you stories like this one on a platform like this one. Why am I on this platform? Well, because this is where I can reach the people that really need to see and hear stories like this one. Sure, there's other platforms where I might not get deplatformed, but I also won't reach the people that really need to be reached. So here I am. And you can help me by buying me a coffee via the button at topherfield.net, and you can find my books, DVDs, and merch at goodpeoplebreakbadlaws.com. And either way, you'll be helping me to keep doing what I do and bringing you more stories like this one. Okay, let's go to the video. Like anything medical, this presentation is pretty dry, and given that I can't risk adding to it with any commentary for fear of falling foul of the censors, I'm just going to play you a few key passages from this presentation.
The updated safety label. The updated safety label for the mRNA COVID vaccines harmonizes the age range across products and adds additional data about the adverse event of myocarditis and what we know. It's based on two factors. It's based first on the unadjusted crude incident rate from the 2023 to 2024 formulation, and it's also based on persistent and concerning cardiac MR findings. So this is a slide that we put together. This is the FDA analysis of the BEST system, which is an observational data system that captures myocarditis and pericarditis following immediately afterwards, the first 7 days, COVID-19 mRNA vaccination. And what you see here is that even in 2023, 2024, the last year for which we have data, you see a rate of myo and pericarditis of 8 out of 1 million in all persons in this age range. And in the highest risk demographic group, young men between the ages of 12 and 24, it's about 27 per million.
Let me pause there and make 3 points. 27 per million in the high-risk group of young men aged 12 to 24 may not sound like all that high of a number. But firstly, that's the number of doses. That's per million doses. So if we give 3 or 4 doses per person, and then we start creating mRNA jabs for everything else, not just COVID, but say the annual flu jab and anything else we can think of, the rate at which these young men will suffer is far higher than the number of adverse reactions per dose would imply, because over a decade they might end up taking over a dozen of these jabs or even more. Second, this is just the number that are found to have an injury within 7 days. There is concerning evidence of much slower onset injuries as well, but again, I can't really talk about that yet. This is just the stuff that we find that had a reaction within a week. Third, this is a cohort of people who have their entire lives ahead of them. They've not even reached their physical prime. These young men, well, they could become tradies with physically demanding jobs or soldiers fighting to protect their country. A few of them may become athletes, or at least they would have become athletes. Many of them want to become dads. And this injury, well, it may not cost them a fortune with a lost sporting career, but it will cost them playtime with their kids. The cost of an injury to a younger person is extremely high in terms of what they miss out on, but also what the rest of us miss out on, what we might have had in our lives, in our countries, in our cultures, in our communities if those people had not been injured. So even if those numbers might not seem large to you, it's a cost that should never have been there in the first place. Let's continue.
Notably, the best data set does not allow us to disambiguate the risk by product, and as such, this is a class mRNA safety label. The second piece of evidence that is captured in the new safety label update is some concerning findings we've noted with late gadolinium enhancement. Now, late gadolinium enhancement is a radiographic abnormality seen on cardiac resonance imaging, and this is how it's been described prior to, in the literature, in the context of myocarditis. Patchy myocardial and focal subepicardial enhancement as an expression of potentially irreversible injury is how it's been described. The FDA notably funded a study led by Jane and colleagues in 2024, which showed among hospitalized patients with COVID-19 induced myocarditis, a high proportion, the majority, had initial late gadolinium enhancement on cardiac MR. But most concerningly, at 5 months of follow-up, 60% of these patients continued to have LGE. And our results for late gadolinium enhancement are consistent with many, many others, as I'll show you here. This was a study from Australia that followed post 6 months for post-COVID-19 vaccine-induced myocarditis. Over half of the patients were still reporting symptoms, 67% had abnormal follow-up cardiac MRs, and 35% showed what was listed as evidence of fibrosis. I did a quick systematic review pulling all available publications documenting late gadolinium enhancement, and these are some takeaway summaries. 92% is occurring in men, 90% have LGE at presentation, but most concerning, 72% have persistent LGE even months thereafter, very consistent with the FDA's sponsored study. Late gadolinium enhancement is not a benign clinical finding. Multiple studies document that LGE is a poor prognostic factor. That's in many cardiac settings, including for patients with myocarditis. LGE has been associated with increased future cardiovascular events and even increased mortality. We do not know the precise implications for LGE from vaccine-induced myocarditis, in part because the follow-up is necessarily so limited. For this reason, the US FDA and the sponsors have issued an SLC with the following 2 main points. 1, the updated unadjusted incidence of myocarditis and/or pericarditis was approximately 27 per million, or 1 in 37,000, in males 12 to 24 years of age for the 2023 to 2024 formulation. And 2, at a median follow-up of approximately 5 months post-vaccination, persistence of abnormal cardiac magnetic resonance imaging findings that are a marker for myocardial injury was common.
Did you hear about that Australian data when it came out? Yeah, neither did I. And notice that the Australian Therapeutic Goods Administration didn't update their warnings in response to that Australian data. Yeah. Now also notice he says that the outcomes are unknown because the follow-up is necessarily limited in the case of mRNA vaccine-induced myocarditis. What he's saying is we don't know what's going to happen because not enough time has passed. We've done the fuck around. Now we're in the find out. And none of us knows what it is that we're going to find out. But to their credit, the US FDA have finally done the right thing, and here is their press release. I'm going to quote from it directly, but I'm going to skip over bits with details that we don't need, like the specific names of the specific products and that kind of thing. FDA has required and approved updates to this prescribing information to include new safety information about the risks of myocarditis and pericarditis following administration of mRNA COVID-19 vaccines. Specifically, FDA has required each manufacturer to update the warning about the risks of myocarditis and pericarditis to include information about 1. The estimated unadjusted incidence of myocarditis or pericarditis following the jabs, and 2. The results of a study that collected information on cardiac magnetic resonance imaging in people who developed myocarditis after the jab. FDA also required each manufacturer to describe the new safety information in the adverse reaction sections of the prescribing information and in the information for recipients and caregivers, end quote. It was safe and effective, remember? People saying that these jabs were causing heart problems in young men, well, they're just crazy anti-vaxxer conspiracy theorists, remember? All I've ever wanted this whole time is for our medical information to be honest, complete, based on the evidence, and for treatment to be voluntary and done without coercion, in accordance with the Nuremberg Code and in accordance with human rights. And it's incredible to think that such a stance became so controversial. And sadly, knowing now that many, many people who trusted the experts now have increased risk of cardiac events for the rest of their life, well, if you'll pardon the pun, knowing that is heartbreaking. What we're seeing from the FDA still doesn't go nearly far enough, but if this is indicative of what we can expect from them now that RFK Jr. is at the helm, then I say bring it on. The only question left is, now that the experts are telling the truth, will the Australian authorities still tell us to trust the experts? My name is Topher Field. This is the Topher Project, and I help busy people like you to keep up with the world as it changes around you. I am 100% viewer supported, and I bring stories like this one to mainstream platforms at considerable risk of being deplatformed, it must be said. So please support me by buying me a coffee via the button at topherfield.net, and also check out my books, DVDs, and merch from goodpeoplebreakbadlaws.com. Thank you for watching to the end. The algorithm loves you, and so do I. Please like, subscribe, check out this recommended video, and as always, think free.